April 18th, 1943, a Sunday. 4 boys are out in Hagley Wood on the edge of Clent Hills in Worcestershire. They're 30 miles from Birmingham, and they're not supposed to be here. This is private land, the Hagley Hall estate, and they're poaching. They're hunting birds' nests. Now, one of them, Bob Farmer, climbs into an old hollowed-out tree to check for eggs. He looks down into the trunk, and a human skull looks back up at him. The boys make a pact, say nothing. They were never here, but the youngest one can't carry it. A few days later, he tells his father, and his father tells the police. When the law pulls that tree apart, they find a nearly complete skeleton of a grown woman wedged down inside a trunk barely 2 feet wide at the top. A scrap of cloth, taffeta, is pushed deep into her mouth. She didn't climb in there. She couldn't have. The pathologist is certain of one thing above all else. She went in feet first while her body was still warm, before it stiffened, which means somebody killed her right there and fed her into the tree like a letter into a mailbox. She was there about 18 months, long enough for the roots to grow through her clothes. Now, this part should have really ended it. The woman was distinctive. A crooked set of front teeth that any dentist would remember, and a cheap wedding ring that was fake. The police checked over 3,000 missing women. They wrote to every dental journal in the country. Nothing, nobody, nada. In a nation at war, a woman is murdered and sealed in a tree on a country estate, and not a single person reports her missing. It's been more than 80 years. We've run her teeth, her clothes, her ring, and every theory you could name. Spies, witches, a local girl nobody wanted. We still don't know her name. The only name she has, a stranger wrote in chalk on a wall a year after she was found. Words that keep reappearing across the English Midlands to this day. Who put Bella in the Wych Elm? I'm John Genoa, and you're watching America's Strangest History. We're here in Vermont, and this is a viewer request video. This is the story of a woman in the tree, the men who built her legend, and the body that vanished twice. Stay with me. Bob Farmer had 3 buddies with him that Sunday: Bob Hart, Tom Willits, and Fred Payne. They're local kids out of Stourbridge and the villages around it. The one who finally talked was the youngest, Tom Willits. The case lands with the Worcestershire County Police. The Sergeant Skerritt gets there first and puts the tree under guard overnight. The next morning, they bring in a man who's going to define the entire case, Professor James Webster. He runs the Home Office Forensic Lab over in Birmingham. The trouble is, opening that tree trunk is too narrow to work in. So a local lumberjack named Jack Pound takes an axe to it, and they get her out in pieces. And what Webster builds back from those pieces is honestly kind of incredible. A woman between the ages of 25 and 40 years old. Webster lands on around 35, barely 5 feet tall, brown hair. From the shape of her hip bones, Webster figures that she carried a child at least once. Though he's careful about it, he says he can't be certain. Then there's her outfit. A mustard-colored skirt, zip up the side, striped cardigan, blue and mustard, a peach-colored slip that somebody sewed by hand, and crepe-soled shoes. Now, this wasn't a wealthy woman. This was somebody scraping by, and her teeth tell a story all their own. She had exactly 1 tooth pulled long before she died, never had a single filling in her life, never wore a plate. Now look hard at the tree itself. That hollow trunk, you couldn't tell it was hollow from the outside, not just by looking. The opening was funneled down to barely 17 inches across the bottom. So whoever put her in there knew that this tree was hollow, knew these specific woods, likely not some stranger passing through on the main road. It had to be somebody local. Now, one more thing, and I want you to hold on to it. When they searched the ground around the tree, the skeleton wasn't all there. A shin bone turned up a good 12 yards out. A few smaller bones, including some of the ones of her hands, they were just gone. Webster's read? Animals. And in fact, there were gnaw marks on the remains, but put a pin in that, we're coming back to it. April 28th, an inquest opens in Stourbridge. The jury hears all of it and lands on a verdict that honestly still stands to this day: murder by some person or persons unknown. And then police do the legwork. They trace her shoes all the way back to the maker up in Northampton. Roughly 6,000 pairs of them were ever made. They run down nearly every single pair. They match every pair but a handful. Think about that. They found the owners of nearly 6,000 pairs of shoes, but they never found the woman wearing this one. March 28th, 1944, Birmingham. A man spots something chalked on a wall over in Pershore Street. Hagley Wood Bella. And around the corner on Upper Dean Street, who put Bella down the Wych Elm? Hagley Wood. 2 days later, a few miles out in Hazelden, another one turns up on a cottage wall. Only this time the name's a little different. Who put Lubella in the Wych Elm? Same neat block capitals, same hand. And here's what got the cops' attention. The writing was too high up on the wall for some kid to be messing around. This was a grown adult doing it on purpose, in a wartime blackout where nobody saw a thing, too. Now, as to that name Bella, that was brand new. Nobody gave this body a name. Not the press, not the police, nobody. So where in the world did the writer get it? Think about it. The one thing the entire country was missing, her name, and somebody's chalked it on the walls like they already knew. The police took it seriously because a name is a lead. They pulled records from every Bella, every Isabella, every Clara Bella, every Lou Bella that they could dig up. A Bella Tonks, a Bella Shua, every one of them a dead end. And then there's the other side of this. Years later, in the early 50s, police claim they actually tracked the writer down. And according to the lead detective, it was a man named Tom Williams, and the guy was just a crank. Somebody who knew nothing, had nothing to do with the case. So was this a killer leaving his signature on the wall, or a crank who pulled the name, I don't know, out of thin air and just happened to stick forever? Whoever started it sure didn't finish it. There's an 84-foot stone obelisk up on Witchbury Hill. It's been there since the 1700s, and by the late 1990s, somebody went up to it and chalked the same question one more time, this time with one letter changed. Who put Bella in the Wych Elm? WYCH to WITCH. And that one swapped letter opens up the darkest theory in this whole case. For centuries in this corner of England, people believed something about a hollow tree, that if you sealed a witch's spirit inside one, it could never get back out, and they believed something about a hand, a human hand. It's cut from a corpse and prepared just right. This was called the Hand of Glory. Legend says that it could open any locked door, it could find buried treasure, it could freeze a whole sleeping household in place while you robbed them. Stuff you'd expect a Hand of Glory to do, I suppose. Remember those missing bones from the tree? The ones scattered around it, including some from her hand? That detail made it all the way to a woman named Dr. Margaret Murray. And Murray was a celebrated archaeologist at the University College London and one of the country's foremost authorities on old witch cults. Murray looked at Bella and didn't see a murder, she saw a ritual. A woman sealed in a tree to trap her spirit, a hand taken to make a Hand of Glory, and to Murray, this was a sacrifice, the work of a coven. And then she pointed 40 miles up the road to a second body. Valentine's Day 1945, a village called Lower Quinton in Warwickshire, a 74-year-old farm worker named Charles Walton's found dead at the foot of Meon Hill. He's killed with his own farm tools, pinned to the ground, marked with a cross. The killing was so strange, they sent for the most famous detective in Britain, Robert Fabian. His prime suspect was Walton's boss, a farmer named Potter, but he couldn't prove a thing. The villagers had their own answer. They whispered that old Walton was a cunning man, a kind of local wizard, and that somebody who feared what he could do probably put him in the ground. And there was history here. Back in the 1870s, just a few miles away, a woman taken for a witch was killed in a very similar way. In 1968, an author named Donald McCormick tied it all together in a book, Murder by Witchcraft. 2 unsolved killings, 1 stretch of haunted countryside. He wrote that the Hagley Wood was a working witches' coven. And honestly, you lay it all out, it starts to look pretty convincing. I mean, a body in a tree, a missing hand, a ritual killing 40 miles away that nobody could track, a famous folklorist signing off on it. I'm thinking case closed. Witches, not so much, because there's a part the legend leaves out. 2 modern researchers, Alex and Pete Merrill, they went back to the original documents, Webster's actual reports, the actual police file. And that severed hand, the Hand of Glory, the single thing this whole theory stands on, it's not in there. None of it. There's no official record of any hand being cut off and buried in any ritual. What the record actually shows is exactly what you heard earlier. Scattered bones, gnaw marks, animal predation. The Hand of Glory wasn't found in that wood. It was added later by writers. And McCormick especially had a reputation for embellishing, for outright inventing his sources. So does that put the witchcraft theory to bed? Not so much either. Because take the hand away and you still have a woman that was fed into a hollow tree by somebody who knew those woods. You still have Charles Walton in the ground. His killer's never been named. And you still have Margaret Murray, a serious scholar who looked at all of it and saw something ancient. Maybe the coven is a story writers told, or maybe those writers just put a name to something that was already loose in those woods. That's your call. But witchcraft was never the only theory. In 1953, a woman wrote a letter to a newspaper, and she swore Bella had nothing to do with witches at all. She was killed by spies. In 1953, a local reporter started digging into the Bella case again. He wrote for the Wolverhampton Express and Star under a pen named Questor. His column shook something loose. Letters started coming in from readers who claimed that they knew something. One of them was signed only Anna. Later, people called her Anna of Claverley. Her real name, it turns out, was Una Hainsworth. Una was once married to a man named Jack Mossop, and what Una says Jack told her before he died is one of the strangest confessions in this whole story. Here's how Una tells it. Around 1940, Jack fell in with a Dutchman, a guy named Van Ralt. Van Ralt always had cash, but never seemed to have a job, and pretty soon, Jack had cash too. New clothes. He bought himself an officer's uniform for some reason. And then one night, Jack came home rattled. He was out drinking at a pub called Littleton Arms with Van Ralt and a woman. A Dutch woman. The way Una tells it, the woman got difficult, made a scene, then she passed out cold. And Van Ralt and Jack helped carry her out to the car. They drove to the woods, and Van Ralt pushed her down into a hollow tree. The idea was that she'd sleep it off and come to in the morning, a sick little prank. Well, she never came to, and Jack Mossop never recovered. He started having the same nightmares again and again. A woman staring out at him from inside a tree. It actually broke him. They committed him to a mental hospital in Stafford, and in 1942, Jack Mossop died in there. Read that date again. 1942. So Jack died a full year before those boys ever looked into that tree. He was tormented by the image of a woman in a tree before anyone on Earth knew that there was a woman in that tree. So where did the spies come in? Well, Una said Van Ralt may have been a German agent, and the theories, they grew out from there. That Bella learned too much about wartime spy rings working in the Midlands, and that the ring made her disappear. And according to the reporter, the police quietly checked Anna's story, and parts of it held up. MI5 got involved. But no arrests, no answers, and years later, when reporters came knocking, the police wouldn't open the case files, which, to a lot of folks, smelled like a cover-up. A dying man's confession, a phantom Dutchman, a secret spy ring, a body in a tree he described before it was ever found. Now I'm thinking this is the answer, right? Not so much. Because remember those two researchers, the Merrills? They went hunting for those files. They filed formal requests with the police, and the answer that came back is that the police got nothing on this. Nothing at all. No secret vault, maybe just nothing's left. And it gets stranger. The entire spy ring, it traces back to one offhand line in Una's account, that Van Ralt may have been a spy. That's it. One maybe. And 70 years of espionage theories grew out of that single word. Nobody ever identified Van Ralt. No record of the man anywhere. Then the Merrills found something in the newspaper's old archive. A letter handwritten by the reporter himself, Questor, whose real name is Wilford Byford Jones. And the handwriting in his letter looked an awful lot like the handwriting in that anonymous letter from Anna. Now the Merrills stopped short of saying it outright, and so will I. But you gotta wonder, how much of Anna of Claverley was a grieving widow, and how much of it was a reporter who needed his story to keep breathing? And yet, Una Hainsworth was real. Jack Mossop was real. He really did die in a Stafford asylum in 1942. None of that's made up. And when the police themselves reviewed this case decades later, they didn't toss the Mossop story out. They couldn't rule Jack Mossop or Van Ralt out. Nobody ever cleared those two men. So maybe it's a reporter's invention, or maybe a broken man really did help dump a woman into a tree and it chased him to his grave. Once again, that's your call. But there's a second spy ring theory coming, and unlike the nameless Dutchman, this one had a name, a face, and a one-way parachute into England. Now, Van Ralt left no trace, no file, no record, nothing. This next spy ring left a paper trail a mile long, and it's all sitting in the declassified files of MI5. His name was Josef Jakobs, a German agent, and here's the interesting detail. He was Abwehr, military intelligence, not Gestapo. Late January 1941, Jakobs parachutes into England in the dead of night near a little village called Ramsey out of Huntingdonshire, and it goes wrong immediately. He breaks his ankle on landing. He can't walk, he can't run, just lies there in the frozen field, firing his pistol into the air until somebody comes. The Home Guard scoops him up within hours. And Josef Jakobs, well, he actually has himself a grim little distinction. He was the last man ever executed at the Tower of London. And because of that busted ankle, he couldn't stand for it, so they sat him in a chair to do it. But when they searched him, they found photographs of a woman, and Jakobs told his interrogators exactly who she was. Her name was Clara Bauerle, a German cabaret singer, his lover, and Jakob said that Clara had been recruited too, that she was meant to follow him right into the English Midlands. MI5 took that seriously enough to put her name on a watch list. And then they waited. Clara Bauerle never showed. No German singer ever came down out of the sky. She just dropped clean out of the record. Now jump ahead to March 2013. A British paper, The Independent, lays Jakob's MI5 file right next to the Bella mystery, and the pieces seem to snap into place. A German spy, a woman recruited to slip into the Midlands. She vanishes in 1941, the exact window Bella died in, so the paper runs it. Bella was Clara Bauerle. And this is the version that goes around the world, the one most people still believe to this day. A nameless body in a tree finally gets a name. A spy, a singer, a lover left behind on the other side. I mean, it's a perfect story. Now I'm thinking we finally solved it. Not so much, because somebody decided to actually go check. And of all the people on this earth, it was Josef Jakob's own granddaughter, a meticulous researcher named Giselle Jakobs. She went looking for whatever became of Clara Bauerle, and in a German archive, she found her. She found Clara's death certificate. Clara died in Berlin on December 16th, 1942. Think about that. Bella, you'll remember, was dead in that tree since the autumn of 1941. Clara was still alive in Berlin more than a year after that. She couldn't possibly be Bella, and it's not even close. Clara stood nearly 6 feet tall. Bella was barely 5. Clara never set one foot in England. MI5 never caught a single whisper of her over the wire. The most famous answer in this whole case, the one with a name, a face, a love story, dies on one slip of German paper. And here's the cruel part. Proving Bella wasn't Clara doesn't tell us a single thing about who Bella was. Killing a wrong answer isn't the same thing as finding the right one. So we're kind of right back where we started. A woman, a tree, no name. So not a witch's sacrifice, not Van Ralt's victim, not Clara the spy. Maybe we've been looking at this backwards the whole time. Maybe she wasn't exotic at all. Maybe the answer is the smallest, saddest one there is. She was just a local woman that nobody anywhere ever came looking for. So forget the spies, forget the witches. The most likely answer to who Bella was is also the most ordinary. She was nobody special per se. She was a woman who slipped through the cracks of a country at war. Maybe she was a local working girl, a sex worker, somebody who crossed the wrong man. Maybe she was a serviceman's girlfriend, pregnant, inconvenient, made to disappear. And remember, Webster believes she once carried a child. Maybe she was Romani, because this detail fits a little too neatly. Around Christmas of 1942, two Romani families, sometimes called gypsies, the Smiths and the Butlers, they were camped barely 120 yards from that tree. The theory goes that Bella was one of their own, that she broke some rule and the camp settled it in their own way. The police pushed back on that hard. The Romani weren't known for killing their own over a grudge, but the theory does have one thing that no other theory has. It explains the silence, because if Bella lived and died outside the settled world, there's no missing persons report. There's no frantic family at the front desk. Nothing in the official record, because she was never in the official record to begin with. And so the police chased ghosts. At one point, a woman's identity card turned up right there in the woods. And for a second, they thought they finally had her. Then they tracked down the car's owner, alive and well. Dead end. A medium came forward with a name and an address for the killer. Also a dead end. In 1949, the whole thing cracked back open when a soldier swore that he saw Romani people near the body. It led nowhere. There was even a witness who remembered one thing that they could never shake: a foul smell drifting from a bend in the lane in the months before those boys ever found her. And look, the ordinary answer is probably the right one. A local woman, a private killing, a body tucked away by somebody who knew exactly where to hide it. But even this theory, the plainest one on the table, can't really close the case. It doesn't explain who chalked her name on a wall. It doesn't explain how the killer knew that the tree was hollow. And it sure doesn't explain the silence, because somebody knew this woman. Her killer knew her. Odds are other people did too. Somebody somewhere lost a daughter in 1941, a sister, a wife, and the people who knew her name chose to take it to the grave with her. There's only one thing left that could ever cut through all of it: her body, her bones, the DNA still locked inside them. So where is she now? Yeah, about that. Where is Bella now? Well, after Webster was done with her, her skeleton never got a burial. It was put on a shelf. For years, Bella's bones were kept by the Birmingham police. It's in their own crime collection, the Black Museum out of Tally-Ho Training Center. And then by the 1970s, they lost her. To be clear, the remains are simply gone. No record of where they went. No grave, no box in the evidence room. That's it. The one piece of physical proof that this woman ever walked the earth just vanished. And here's how cruel this gets. In 2018, a forensic team at Liverpool John Moores University built the face for Bella, a real modern reconstruction. But they couldn't use her skull because her skull is missing. They had to build her face off old black and white photographs of it. So now we have a face. We can look her right in the eyes. We just have no idea whose eyes they are. In 2023, the BBC put out a public appeal. They're begging museums, collectors, anybody to please find those missing bones, because modern DNA could finally give this woman back her name. Nothing turned up. The bones are still out there somewhere, or maybe they're just dust. And there's one last thread that never got tied off. Back in 1958, Professor Webster went on TV and casually claimed that the police had identified Bella. After that, he refused to speak another word about it. And so did the police. Did they actually know? Was it a bluff? Whatever Webster knew, he took it to the grave with him, and that's where it ends, for good. No bones means no DNA. No DNA means no name. Not now, not ever. More than 80 years on, it's still officially an open murder. It's on the books at the West Mercia Police, a case that can't be solved. It's left open forever. This woman vanished once, the night somebody killed her and pushed her down into that tree, and then she vanished a second time when the world went and lost her bones. So, she's gone twice. And look at what's left behind. The noise, the witches that were never there, the spy ring that grew out of a single word, the famous singer who died a year too late in Berlin, a legend built, a whole lot of it, by men with newspapers to sell and books to fill. Strip all of it away, and you're left with the smallest, hardest truth in this entire case. A real woman was murdered. Somebody who knew those woods fed her into a hollow tree. Nobody ever said her name out loud. And now, nobody ever can. Up on that hill, the obelisk still stands, and every so often, in the same neat block capitals, the same question comes back. Who put Bella in the Wych Elm? But that was never really the only question, was it? The real one is colder. Who was she? And who made certain we'd never find out? What do you think? I'm John Genoa. This is America's Strangest History. Thanks for watching.